Hey folks, it's Neil from Anchor Ranch Farm in beautiful Scio, Oregon. It is the beginning of April, and these two rams have been in together for about an hour now. It looks like they're settling down. They did a little bit of headbutting, but nothing major. What I'm trying to avoid, and I think successfully, because I've seen them grazing together now, they're still doing a little jostling, pushing around. They've got to see, they have to see who's the dominant ram, and then my hope is they'll be friends. They've got to be separated out from the flock of ewes and the lambs right now until breeding season comes again in the fall. And of course, sheep are herd animals, so last year the big guy was on his own, and he made it through fine, but sheep aren't really happy, if that's the word, when they're by themselves. So now they'll have company. But I'm trying to avoid, I didn't want them to do big run-up headbutts where one of them could get seriously injured. What I did was, for the past 4 days or so, I had them on opposite sides of a metal, not an electric, but a metal fence. So they could go right up together, but they couldn't actually run after each other, and they sort of get to know each other. And now I've introduced them in together today. They did a few sort of small headbutts, but nothing major, nothing that would seriously injure one of them. So I think we're good. I think we're okay now. And they'll be friends. Yeah, the little guy is still. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of when you're wrestling with your son or your daughter or something, and they're kind of going, getting a little into it, and so you just kind of stiff arm them and hold them up for look, settle down now. That's what this big guy reminds me of. The other one was born last year, so he's a yearling. The big guy's 3 years old, I think, 4 years old. Ramses is his name. I haven't named the other one yet. What I'm doing here, when it's breeding season, I'll introduce both these rams to the ewes together. What's happened is the flock has grown, is that I have lambs strung out over several months. So for example, there's 4 over there that were born late. I think the latest was born July last year. I like them to be born March and April. And so what happens if they're born in July, by the wintertime, they're still not all that large, and they just don't gain. As it gets colder, they don't really put on weight. And so those are still not ready to process, which is kind of annoying. I'd rather have them born all within the same couple of months and finish all within the same couple of months. That makes things easier. So by putting 2 rams in with the flock instead of 1, my hope is they'll get all the ewes bred faster. Now, eventually, I'm talking long-term goals. What I'd like to do is eventually have 2 flocks, have 2 flocks of ewes and breed one in the fall to have lambing in spring, and one in the spring to lamb in fall. Because we don't use any water for irrigation, the grass kind of dries out in the summer as it stops raining in June-ish, and then July and August everything dries out. And so a more efficient use of grass, and thus the water, would be to have the lambs not spaced out over a few months, but spaced out at those 2 different times of the year. Have lambs born in March and April, and we've got plenty of. He's like, buddy, what are you doing? You're not. Listen, you're not going to win this. Should I call the little one Buddy? I don't know. We'll see. Ramses and Buddy. I'll think about it. Maybe I'll ask my kids. But because we don't use water to irrigate the pastures, we've got a lot of growth of grass in the spring. It's actually so much, it's so flush that it's hard to keep up with it with the flock. And so sort of having 2 flocks split up and lambing at 2 different times of year to use the flush of grass in the spring and also the flush of grass in the fall, I think would be more efficient. But again, that's a long-term goal. Of course, we do buy, in that sort of low season, we do buy supplemental hay, which is irrigated. So we're not completely free of irrigation, but we do the best we can. And bringing hay onto the farm is bringing organic matter, extra organic matter on the farm, which then goes in the soil, and that organic matter in the soil creates kind of a sponge that soaks up more water. So over time, we're building the capacity to hold more water in the soil and thus use it better. Now, this is all because Oregon has actually horrible water management. Most people in Oregon don't know this, but you don't own your water in Oregon. You don't own your surface water. It's all managed, and it's by the government. It's owned by the government, the state government, and it's managed mostly, as far as I can tell, for the benefit of salmon. And I understand, like, you know, everybody likes salmon and stuff like that, but there are actually other species out there. And this is the problem with, this is why I think experts are trash. This is a problem with experts. You know, we have this, it's a scientifically managed water management. People decide, oh, well, this is a stream, this is a river, we've designated this a waterway, so there needs to be water in it at all time. You know, that's what our experts tell us. But the experts don't actually know anything. They've never actually done anything. They don't know what they're talking about. I've written about this before in one of our newsletters. You know, back in the, and I'm not sure about here, at least on the East Coast, when European settlers came to the Americas, the local Indian tribes, the Wampanoag and people like that, who introduced them to corn farming, to maize farming, would say, you know, plant the corn when the oak tree leaves are the size of a squirrel's ear. Well, now, you know, several hundred years later, we have all of this scientific data and things. You can measure the temperature of the soil, humidity, all that, to tell you when to plant the corn. But in fact, the best thing to go on is still plant your corn when the oak tree leaves are the size of the squirrel's ear. Why? Because the Wampanoag had been farming corn for like 1,000 years, and they know what they're talking about. And the experts who are, you know, doing this stuff in a lab, that's not the real world. So we have the same thing with water management in Oregon. You know, people think, oh, well, it's good. It's good for the environment. It's good for the ecology for streams to have water in them. That's natural, but it's actually not natural. It's completely unnatural. In fact, what this country used to be like was it was covered in ponds because there were beaver everywhere. And we've killed off all or most of the beaver, and we've artificially managed it so there aren't any ponds. In fact, it's illegal to have a pond on your property in Oregon. But the thing about when there were beaver and ponds, and it was actually more natural, what would happen would be, you know, yes, you have a seasonal stream. And in salmon season, it would be full of water, and then it would dry up and the water would go back to the ponds. And now you have a pond going into the hot, dry, you know, 90 degrees of July and August. And that pond, as that sunlight hits it, is going to evaporate, and it's going to create a microclimate of higher humidity in that little area. I'm talking like a small pond, like increasing the humidity over just an acre or so. And what happens is that higher humidity then, because of the kind of climate we have, it still gets pretty cooler at night in the summertime. That creates dew in the morning. So all the plants are covered in dew in the morning, and that dew drips down, moisturizes the soil, waters those plants, and that's how the plants get water all summer in the dry season. So if in fact the best thing to do for our ecology, and the most natural thing, if we can't bring the beaver back, at least would be to create ponds, you know, do the beaver's job for them, and have ponds everywhere. And of course, that's also a more efficient use of water because you're using it locally over a small area, so you get less waste. and that's that would be the smart thing to do. But we don't do that because that's not what the experts say to do. Of course, the experts are paid for by lobbyists from corporate agriculture, and the way we do use water to irrigate, mostly in Oregon, is at least in this part of Oregon, is you pump it out of the ground, and then you spray it through sprayers through a huge arc through the sky, which of course is, then you have a lot of that evaporating, but it's going high in the air, and it's it's under pressure, and so water is well, the whole greenhouse grass thing is kind of dumb. That's just sort of that's like an easy explanation for kids. It's not actually how how it works. But water is the #1 greenhouse gas. So now in the hottest part of the year, you have these, this higher humidity from irrigation that's spraying up in the sky and trapping solar energy and making it even hotter on the field than it would otherwise be. It's just dumb. But we do the best we can. Eventually, I hope the right thing to do would be to have resources like that managed locally by local people who live and work on the land, because that's going to be much more efficient use of resources than top-down centralized planning. But the way to do that is locally, one farm, one backyard at a time. The other reason we don't have ponds all over the United States is this stupid avian flu thing. I've written about this as well. So the chickens, if you have 50,000 chickens in a warehouse where if the fans go off, the chickens will asphyxiate on their own aerosolized manure. Those chickens get avian flu. And the conclusion has been, well, they must be getting avian flu from the wild waterfowl. So we need to get rid of the ponds where the wild waterfowl congregate, because then that will keep them away from our domestic chickens and prevent avian flu. Now, of course, it couldn't possibly be the way you're keeping those CAFO chickens. Now, if you look at, places that raise pasture-raised chicken, chickens outdoors on pasture with a reasonable stocking density, they pretty much never get avian flu. But the experts tell us it's the waterfowl, it's the wild ducks, it's not locking your chickens in a cage that's the problem. So there you go. I think experts are trash. People who know what they're doing are the people who've done it. And especially the people who have done it for hundreds of years successfully. And maybe we should learn more from them and less from experts. But these guys are still going at it, but they're not doing anything to hurt each other. The other ones are coming over to show their stuff off. I don't need that many rams, so they are not going to be breeding. They will be feeding some local families. We try to keep them happy. Well, I don't know what happy is for a sheep, but we try to keep them safe, healthy, give them lots of space to move around in, as natural as possible. They wouldn't be alive unless people wanted to eat lamb. And then their job is to feed people after being humanely processed at a local processor. So maybe one day all the farms will have ponds everywhere, and we'll make better local management of our resources for the future, managing our resources for our great-grandchildren and not for corporate profits. And You know, we do the best we can. We appreciate others who do the best they can. And we don't have anything against farmers who don't do things this way, because it's hard. And as we transition from the stupid methods of agriculture that we use today to more sustainable, rational, holistic methods of agriculture that we're going to have to use for the future. You know, you still have people have been doing this for years, and they're at least producing food that feeds people. That's important. So we don't hold it against them. We respect what they do. The farmers, not the ag corporations. And this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. All right. Peace be with you. AnchorRanchFarm.com for more about us.